can represent for Australia in general.
Any comment? Yes, please.
Quick comment, very quick comment for me, and I would definitely get the details after this, so I can include you on my future research agendas. I completely support what Philo said, and I would actually, from my quick count, very, very quick count of Australian political science, political science, international relations departments around Australia, I can say that UWA, Curtin, and ATFA, but University of New South Wales side of ATFA, have their heads of politics departments are actually former specialists on the Soviet Union. And that is very interesting because their view of Europe is still kind of overshadowed by the traditional tension between the East and the West. And to be honest, the war of Russia against Georgia has given a lot of pleasure to some former Soviet specialists, because a lot of them had to reinvent themselves in the 90s, and a lot of them had to overnight pretty much become Europe specialists, and they really were specialists on Soviet Union and Soviet relations with the rest of the world, including Australia. In terms of the comment made by the first gentleman, I definitely support that there is a need to exchange ideas. For example, countries like Greece haven't done well at all in integrating the immigrants, but Greece is also faced with, some estimates say, over 1 million immigrants, of which only 10% or 100,000 is officially registered. So pretty much Greece is the gateway to Europe, and is really, really struggling with this burden sharing, and the Greeks feel that they are faced with the greatest part of this burden. However, countries like Germany have done much better, and Holland, which have a lot of former migrants who have been recently appointed to ministerial and cabinet positions. And this is not just in Greece and Holland, it's also happened in non-EU countries like Norway, but in other countries around Europe. We also have to remember that Europe and the EU are often used as one word. However, Europe is a bit larger than the EU concept, but the EU is an essential part of Europe. To the last comment, I guess, we have to also remember that the Australian diplomatic post in Brussels is also a post of the ambassador to NATO. So I would argue that yes, possibly there is a bit more emphasis on this defense background. However, this is essential to be obviously complemented by deeper knowledge of the EU, because this position covers different portfolios and not just the EU. So Dr. Brendan Nelson, who is actually a medical professional by background, was previously defense minister, and he was really apparently successful in bridging this knowledge gap. We don't know how Mr. Lewis will fare, but so far comments have been positive. But I think you can offer perhaps a lot of insight on this topic, on how well Australian interests are recognized in Brussels, and how can we do better to represent them and voice our own presence in this kind of jungle of lobbyists in Brussels. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments to comment on what has just been said. I think I would agree with Philomena's analysis that Australia has a lot to teach in terms of multicultural society, which I think is something very, very inspiring for Europe, and there are many failed experiences in Europe in trying to accommodate or create multicultural societies. But on the other hand, I would tend to agree with the intervention of previous intervention, where in certain areas, and I would say my immigration is one, where I find the debate in Australia quite hysterical on something which is way out of proportion compared to what we are facing in Europe. Refugees, yeah. Refugees, yes. And that of course has a strong human rights component dimension. And apologies about my reference to the fact that there are no Australian journalists in Europe. I think it's both
it's technically
correct,
it's correct,
technically correct, but not
in spirit,
not completely fair.